Hello everyone, welcome back. It's a rainy Thursday. It's a day with lots of chores and a day when I've had notes on projects to work on, and I've been doing words on my current project, which I'll tell you about sooner or later. But in the meantime, welcome back. And all this week I've been talking about cozy books and the books that make me feel cozy and that I want to retreat into when I need to have. Oops, my battery's going. I hope this lasts. And it turns out people quite like it when I talk about cozy books. There's been a surge, or as news reporters seem to say these days, an upsurge in numbers just recently, which is nice. Welcome everyone who hasn't seen my show yet. If you're new to this channel, this is where I chat about my favorite books and what I'm reading and what I'm writing and what I'm working on here in my study, surrounded by all this gubbins. And usually the cat is here as well. Today he's just sent a representative in the form of lots of cat hair on this black t-shirt, which you're probably picking up as you watch this. He's still asleep, having been awake all night again, because the weather is changeable and it's warm, and the undergrowth is so exciting in the night to a cat. Anyway, cozy books. I felt the need myself in the last few days for something quite cozy, and it's interesting what you gravitate to. I've picked up books and I've dropped them, and I've gravitated elsewhere. And as you know, I tend to follow my nose with reading. Sometimes I see things through all to the end, even if I'm not enjoying it, in the hope that a book will suddenly go good or improve. That's what happened with The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley last week, and I was talking about. It's actually worth sticking with something sometimes, even when you're not feeling it. What I've been reading mostly are these issues of Slightly Foxed magazine, something that always looked like it was for poshos. You'd see issues of this and you'd see them online as well. It's a quarterly literary journal that you subscribe to, and they also publish small editions of things in very kind of fancy little editions, and there's a podcast, and they do seem like a bunch of posh people in a kind of very old-fashioned way. And then when you look into it, I picked up one of the issues of this. I think it was this one from summer 2022 in Oxfam in Chorlton. That's full of poshos as well. And you find out that the journal is just full of these kind of slightly random essays by all kinds of literary bods, some of whom you know and some you don't. And in this one that I picked up, there were essays about Lark Rise to Candleford and The Wind in the Willows. So books that are kind of slightly nostalgic, classics, sometimes off the beaten track, books in some cases that have disappeared off the radar completely. And in these essays, people are making a case for them or why they love them, or reminding people about these books or letting them know that they exist. So I think it's called something like, the Real Readers Quarterly. It's not academic and it's not theoretical. It's very much about people who really read, and that love for these books shines off the page in almost every essay I've read. And I've gone through 2 of these cover to cover this week. And that's really unusual for any kind of journal or magazine for me. I'm a great dipper in for these kinds of things. The only thing I can think of like it is the pulp horror and paperback fanatic books, quarterlies by Justin Marriott, about a very kind of low-class form of literature, the paperback pulp of the 70s, 60s, 70s and 80s. In fact, there's an issue here. I love this. Whoops. I'm just having an avalanche in the corner. Bear with me while I have an avalanche of books. Oh dear. These, Justin Marriott is a real enthusiast, just as much as the people from Slightly Foxed. And these are just as erudite in their way. There's a late interview here with Guy N. Smith, who wrote all those wonderful books about the crabs and the ghouls and the werewolves in the 1970s. He was like lower down the pecking order in terms of respectability from Stephen King, James Herbert, Guy N. Smith. But he hit the sweet spot of disturbing nastiness in a way that very few could. Anyway, I would recommend the Paperback Fanatic and pulp horror magazines that Justin Marriott does. But, as I've discovered this week, I also recommend Slightly Foxed. Honestly, I'm sat there reading essays about the most obscure travellers in Edwardian times going to Afghanistan, or books about boxing, and of course, the actual literal content. The subject of these essays is beside the point, in a way. It's the enthusiasm of both the writer of the essay and their enthusiasm for the kind of crazy eccentrics who wrote these books in the first place. Luckily, there are a lot of copies of these quarterlies, and they're kind of around. So I shall be collecting them up, I think, gradually, when I see them. I'm very pleased to have discovered these, and I'm very tempted to subscribe, although I must stop subscribing to stuff. It costs an absolute fortune. And the other thing about subscribing is that it's very hard to unsubscribe from things. They make it as difficult as possible. I'm not sure what Slightly Foxed, how they're fixed. But other things I subscribe to, like the New Yorker, it's like escaping from coldits to get out of. And so you just remain, and these things keep coming at you, and you keep reading. Anyway, so that's been a lovely distraction this week. I'd been reading Rick Riordan at the weekend, one of his, or the first of his Egyptian books, which is nice enough. They're very much kids' adventure books. I would have loved these as a kid, and the way they explain the mythology to you, and explaining things like what a cartouche is. Somebody's name surrounded by a circle to protect it from evil forces. No one's ever told me that before. But it comes up in the course of an adventure with Egyptian gods and monsters in the present day for these kids. Just the kind of thing that was made for me as a kid, but they're coming out in recent years. He did Percy Jackson as well, a series I've only dipped into. I've only read the first one or two, I think. These are huge books. 500 pages for this kind of adventure story is kind of too long for me. My reading stamina for this kind of adventure, it probably stops at about 120 pages, which is interesting because I got to 141 and then I paused. That's the natural pause for me. I want a cliffhanger, and I want to be able to go on to book 2. I keep saying this. Last week I was complaining about thrillers like The Paris Apartment being 100 pages too long, and I think I'm right. What do I know? This is sold in its millions, so I don't know anything. That again reminds me of that silly bloke who I used to know in a shop, and we were talking about a big thriller that had come out, and he was doing an event interviewing the bloke who'd written it, and I was saying, wow, I'd liked it so much because it was clearly riffing off Pamela and Mr. B and the very form of Samuel Johnson's Pamela back in the 18th century, one of the first domestic thrillers. And so I'm burbling on about this in a bookshop on a barge in Manchester, and this fella goes, forget about all that rubbish, 8 million copies. which to me is the ultimate expression of the crassness of so many people involved in the world of books. Here I am burbling about Samuel Johnson and somebody's waving numbers at me. Just bugger off. Let's be enthusiasts. Let's be slightly foxed rather than anything else, rather than the wolves. Anyway, last night, looking for something more cozy than dashing about with Egyptian gods and monsters, I ended up going back to Little House on the Prairie. Laura Ingalls Wilder, because they're repeating the old TV show on one of the obscure cable channels we've got, and I've happened upon it this week, a few episodes into the first season. And last night, on a rainy, sultry July night, was just subsumed by this wonderful nostalgia for watching Little House. When I was about 7 or 8, and it was first on in the UK, I'd watch it with my mum, and we'd have tea together on the coffee table watching it every Thursday night. And it was always steak and kidney pie with flaky pastry topping that you cooked in a tin that came from Fray Bentos. And creatures of habit, we always had the same tea on a Thursday. And we loved Little House. And it was nostalgic for a time that we'd never lived in, far away and a long time ago. But they were so happy. And clearly it was something that we were drawn to. And it was years before I read the books, probably in my 20s or 30s, because, of course, they were girls' books, and girls' books were not something I was going to walk around with in Aycliffe. The closest I could get was, I don't know, the Famous Five or something. But things like Little Women, I've said this before, Little Women, Little House, and Anne of Green Gables were things I watched on the telly rather than read. And I wish I'd read them. I wish I'd been able to read them earlier. I bought this whole set, in a box set, with the wonderful, what's he called, Garth, the artist, the illustrator, Garth Williams illustrations. Anyway, I sat down and read the first 50 pages in a flash last night. This is book 2. I reread book 1, Little House in the Big Woods, at some point last year, thinking I'll just go back to them when I need to. And last night was when I needed to. I'd forgotten when they set off in their cart, their covered cart, and they're heading from Wisconsin across the plains of Kansas. And there's rivers, frozen rivers, and then rivers they have to ford when the ice melts. And they go across, clinging to the cart, and the father swimming, pulling the donkeys across. And they lose the dog, they lose Jack, the little dog, and they think he's been swept away and drowned, and everyone's full of remorse. And it's the most horrible moment. So there I am, looking for comfort, getting upset about Jack the dog. I'll not tell you what happens, but it's okay. Speaking of dogs, this is something, I can't find the first one now. No, I've lost the first one, which is really annoying. Mutts, I've been reading this week. Mutts 2 has just arrived. These are from the 90s reprints of a daily comic strip by Patrick McDonnell in the States. I've really lost the first one, I'm so annoyed. And he clearly indebted to Peanuts. And it's something I didn't know about until, I think I've talked about this already on here. Somebody mentioned another book of his on Facebook, and I did some research thinking the drawings that I just glimpsed looked beautiful. And so they are. I was in the mood for a kind of very simple, straightforward, sweet-hearted comic strip, and a kind of timeless thing as well. And I found one. Something that's gone on for all these years, so there's a lovely backlog of things to collect up. And of course, looking online, the first 2 volumes were just a couple of quid. So, yeah, nice things to pick up. Okay, that's my slightly scattershot reading this week, taking in mythology, cats and dogs, coziness generally. But clearly, coziness is something we're all in the mood for. So let's stick with that for a while. I hope everybody's well, and I hope to see you again quite soon. Bye bye.